The medium isn't my kind of game. A walking simulator with light puzzle and gameplay elements sprinkled throughout. The story has its moments. It's a decent premise, but remains ho-hum for large stretches. It suffers from several common issues that plague modern gaming. A protagonist that doesn't know when to pipe down, and a lack of subtlety. The medium spells out everything to and for us.
So worth it. I love you, bolt cutters.
It's a game I won't give much thought to beyond one key fact. The studio behind the medium, Bloober Team, are helming the Silent Hill 2 remake. Despite the medium being a ho-hum experience, I am glad I played it. It gives me a better idea of what to expect with the Silent Hill 2 remake. What I experienced doesn't give me much hope for the remake. Not that I had much before. To be fair, I'm not a fan of remakes, something I've made clear throughout several videos. Of games that don't need a remake, Silent Hill 2 would be near the top of my list. It was very much lightning in a bottle. The expectations and reverence for such a title makes it something that's going to be next to impossible to top. I don't care who would be making the remake. To expect anything else will be a fool's errand. Before playing the medium, I was only familiar with Bloober Team through osmosis. I was aware of the many criticisms thrown Bloober's way, for their overall output and specific issues with the medium. I did have some preconceived notions going in of what to expect. I could see how some have come to have certain interpretations and conclusions of the media. I found myself not coming to the same conclusions and interpretations at points. It's not that the game's plot doesn't have issues. It has plenty of them. There's a lack of subtlety. There are several questionable choices in how they deal with heavy subject matter. While it looks great, there's little beyond the surface level. Having now played the medium, I do see a different trajectory in how the Silent Hill 2 remake might play out from what I had in mind before. I don't have much hope for it, but now it's in a different way. Bloober Team can build out a decent atmosphere, and the dual reality system is intriguing. But they do next to nothing with it, making it worse with what they've done with the technology. Plus, bloober is such a goofy word. To me, it's like a cross of blooper and goober.
Alright, goober, let go of my camera, goober. Let go of my camera, goober. Get that out of my face. Don't touch my camera, goober.
The medium begins with our protagonist, Marianne, telling a story to someone. At first, it seems like she's talking to us, the player. Who she's talking to isn't revealed until the tail end of the game. She speaks of a dream she's had since being a young girl. A woman running to the end of a pier on a lake. Someone pursuing her with a gun. A gunshot. Marianne has been a medium since she was a little girl. In the present day, 1999, she's off to say goodbye to her foster father, Jack, who's passed away. Jack was the owner of a funeral home. He saw her powers as a medium as a gift, and not a curse. Something her other foster parents didn't see. These powers of her made her an outcast. Now, despite taking place in Poland, isn't it a bit odd that there's no Polish dub? Well, there were a couple of reasons. One was to reach a larger audience. The other was due to limitations caused by the pandemic during development. Using her medium powers, Marianne sends Jack's spirit away with one final goodbye.
No risky stuff then. Huh? All right?
All right, Jack. Now, get some rest.
I need no. Yes. Be good, Marianne. I love you, my child. I've loved you since the moment you walked into my life. Remember that.
In mourning, Marianne receives a phone call from an unknown man. A man named Thomas is seeking her help. He knows about her powers. He tells her to come to Niwa Resort to get answers.
I need you to trust me.
Trust you? I don't even know you.
It all starts with a dead girl.
What did you say?
The Niwa Resort. Find me there. Please. The light, it's almost gone. It's not dark yet, but it's getting there. You're the only one who can stop it. You're my only chance.
Hello? Hello?
As mentioned, gameplay is light in the medium. The focus is on the walking simulator element, with puzzles and gameplay sprinkled throughout. There are bits where the game refuses to let you run, and these running animations, not the greatest. I can understand why they have these forced walking segments. It allows conversations to play out timing-wise as we move forward. I'm never a fan of when games do this. At this point, might as well give us a cutscene. Although with how little there is to the gameplay to the medium, I guess they have to give something for us to do. And I could live with this fact if there are reasonable puzzles found within. What do we get in the medium? Little of note. There are a couple of photo-developing quote-unquote puzzles of timing the development and doing so in the right order. And we have a survival horror classic. Flick certain switches to get in the right range to turn on the power. This took me 2 tries for me to solve. Come on, at least make it more challenging. Throw some more my way. There's one section where we need to find the name of someone so we could send their spirit away. There's a meeting room with a list of attendees. From this list, we use the clues to figure out the person's name. And here is where a perfect example of one of the medium's largest flaws emerge. A flaw that plagues so many modern games, where the game gives you next to no room to take things in and having the protagonist spell everything out. You can't solve this puzzle on your own and take a guess. You have to wait until Mary Ann gets it as well.
That's it. Nicholas. Okay, Nick. Let's get you out of here.
Mary Ann will make sure you more or less get everything that happens within the medium. She rarely shuts up. Having a chatty protagonist in a horror title is one of the last places you want one. Bloober does show talent in their visuals, their art direction, and atmosphere. One that pulls heavy influence from the Polish artist Zdzisław Beksiński. To have the medium tell so much instead of showing, and not let the player soak things in, is a bummer. At various points, Mary Ann will give an inner monologue like she's in a noir film. Did any of them add anything to the story? Some of the early game monologues are fine. It gives explanation of her powers and establishes the rules. Fine by me. There's one later on where she mentions being able to enter the spirit world on her own accord for the first time. No issues there.
It was the first time that had ever happened. I touched the mirror and crossed over to the other side.
Else you could chop the rest out with no loss. Several of them recap what we went through but a few minutes ago. For example, after the phone call from Thomas, Mary Ann heads to Neva. She gives a recap of what we saw but a few minutes ago. Why couldn't we have her ride over here in silence? Let the atmosphere take us in. And it's not like Mary Ann's a bad character. She does have her moments. She shows compassion to others. Growing up, she was a misfit due to her powers as a medium. She has a dorky streak about her. Her personality shines through in the encounters with the dog and Sadness. Yes, there's a character that goes by Sadness. We'll cover that later.
Sadness? We gotta stop meeting like this.
I told you to follow me!
Take it easy, Sad. This place is huge. It's easy to get lost.
Just stick with me.
Okay. I'll stick like a tick.
You're funny.
She also scored several points in my book for making a reference to Prince.
Just Vivienne? No. Probably just a stage name. The artist formerly known as Vivienne.
In cutscenes or examining items, I have no issues with her talking. It's what she'd say between those stretches, the unprompted ones, that got in the way. I think it's time game developers make a pledge with regard to horror protagonists. My character shall not talk unless spoken to, in a cutscene, or I, the player, prompt them to when examining something, so help me God. Well, actually scratch that. Not only horror protagonists, but game protagonists in general. One of the better elements of the medium story is finding notes from a man named F, or Francis, as we'll learn later on. He plays an important role in what happened at Neva. I was ready for Mary Ann to go, "Oh, Francis had issues, poor guy," and spell things out to the player. But she doesn't. The game lets you take it in. As a result, it's one of the more compelling bits within the medium's plot. One thing Bloober has mentioned in interviews for the Silent Hill 2 remake is that they will be quote-unquote modernizing some dialogue. If that doesn't raise any red flags for you, I don't know what's wrong with you. This could mean many things, but there's two components I'm expecting to occur. One is having characters swear like sailors. Mary Ann herself falls victim to this several times. Here's another pledge developers can make. Have a max of 3 or so swears so those words have more weight. I've seen several memes for the Silent Hill 2 remake of James being a potty mouth. But the other component of modernizing dialogue is talking more. It won't surprise me if the descent into Silent Hill has James talking to himself, ruining the moment. What's with all this fog? What was that noise? Mary, where the fuck are you? Let's talk about some of the positives of the medium. It makes use of fixed camera angles. Always so nice to see in a modern game. There are no tank controls, but since there's so little to the gameplay, that's not an issue. And Bloober Team does show a strong understanding of how to make fixed camera angles work, whether up close or from a distance. There are several impressive shots throughout. So of course the Silent Hill 2 remake will be over the shoulder. They couldn't compromise and do fixed camera angles and switch to over the shoulder for combat. Then again, this shouldn't come as a surprise for what is a large production. You know Konami would never approve of it. Too bad, because the medium shows an understanding of using fixed camera angles. The thing is, the medium wasn't going to make use of fixed camera angles at first. They came about through the use of dual realities. This is where we control Mary Ann in the material world and the spiritual world at the same time through a split screen. This is the medium's main selling point and differentiator. It's something Bloober had in the back of their mind for some time, but had to wait for the right technology to render it. Even then, the game had performance issues at launch, which is the norm these days. While my computer isn't the fastest, it was disappointing to have micro stutters a few years after its launch. But Unreal Engine. Their initial approach was for the game to be over the shoulder. Playtesters found the split screen disorienting, hard to follow, and caused motion sickness. As a result, they switched to fixed camera angles to solve the issue and used it throughout the entire game. It always seems when you hear about playtesting stories, it's for the worse, where you have to wonder where on God's green earth did they find these people. One infamous example comes from Dishonored. Playtesters wouldn't go upstairs because a guard told them not to. They had to add hints to nudge the player to go upstairs. But thanks to the playtesters for the medium, we got fixed camera angles as a result. That said, I'm sure the studio itself would have picked it up at some point. With this dual reality, do they do anything interesting with it? From a presentation perspective, yes. Not much on the gameplay front. Granted, gameplay isn't Bloober's specialty. The dual realities add an element of the absurd and unease to cutscenes. Marianne talking with someone or interacting with something in the spiritual world, while in the material world, she's off in La La Land. It would look ridiculous if someone else was watching her in the material world. It does help add to the character of Marianne and the experience of the medium. On the gameplay front, the medium takes little advantage of the dual realities. One ability you could use is the out-of-body experience, where Marianne remains in place in the material world but can move around the spiritual world. You can only do this for a limited time, as Marianne's spirit fades away in a cool effect. There's one stretch near the end where you need to lure away the maw. We'll talk about in a bit, in the spiritual world so you can progress in the material world. You need to switch back and forth between the two to cause a distraction to get by. A reasonable way of using the dual reality mechanic. Sounds like an early game encounter, right? No, this is the game's last encounter before the ending. This is one of the biggest disappointments with the medium. A tiny glimpse of what you could do with the gameplay front with the dual realities. With some clever design, you could make a great puzzle-based game out of this mechanic. Wouldn't it be great to see what someone else could do with a similar system? Well, too bad. Bloober filed a patent on their dual reality system in 2016, granted in late 2019. One horror game I've covered on this channel, Eternal Darkness on the GameCube, had a patent for its sanity system, which by the way has now expired, budding game developers. A great system that saw Silicon Knights and Nintendo do nothing with it after Eternal Darkness. For more recent Nintendo patents, they applied for over 30 related to Tears of the Kingdom. They are still pending, and several I looked at were very broad in their focus. Now, I'm all for protecting your copyright and your IPs, but putting a patent on gameplay elements, that's never sat right with me. I know many others agree. I'm with John Carmack on this one. He feels that software patents are more or less like mugging someone. I came across an interview with Carmack in the late 90s where he almost quit id over the prospect of filing patents. What it was they were looking to patent, I couldn't find the answer to, but if I had to guess, something to do with their code. When id released the source code for Doom 3 in 2011, Carmack had to make some changes to avoid a patent issue. Another company had filed a patent for a shadow rendering algorithm that id used. The change was minor, a few tweaks to a few lines of code. But still silly this had to happen to avoid issues with patents. If you're interested in learning more about the patent for the medium, I'll have a link to it in the description and pinned comment. Now, it's not like if there was no patent, dozens of games would be trying to get on this mechanic, but it's more than enough to deter others from trying. Bloober mentioned they don't have any plans to make use of it in the near future, so again, what's the point of it? As mentioned earlier, there is a creature known as the Maw who pops up throughout the medium, a few on-rail chase scenes and some of the dreaded forced stealth sequences, where it's real try and error that may take a few tries. You can hold your breath to not give away your position. That's all there really is to these gameplay stretches. What about the Maw itself? Like Marianne, the Maw is very chatty. It's a bit goofy and over the top, but some of the things he says are quite unsettling. Troy Baker provides the voice of the Maw, but it's not him doing his usual Troy Baker voice. You can tell he's having a blast with this role. While I don't feel the Maw was a great monster, he's not bad by any stretch. Of all the issues I had with the medium, I didn't find the Maw to be one of the major ones. Let's go through the highs and lows in the medium. Marianne arrives at Neva, what used to be a government-owned vacation resort. About 15 years ago, a Neva massacre occurred. Details were never made clear to the public and became an urban legend. Through notes, echoes, and the spirit world, we'll begin to piece together what happened amongst the ruins of Neva. Early on, we'll meet sadness in the spiritual world. That's what we're going with here? What is this, Inside Out? To be fair, she did forget her name. Still, we couldn't find anything less eye-rolling. We discovered that her real name is Liliane, or Lily, not long after. One thing that Marianne requires to send spirits away is to know their name. We'll come across many others who have forgotten their name and we need to find. But we can't send Sadness or Lily away just yet. Something's holding her here. These cutscenes with Marianne and Sadness are some of the game's better moments, where Marianne's personality shines through. They have a fun little dynamic.
Thanks. But I can take care of myself. Hey, I was wondering, have you seen...
Marianne,
Yes.
would you play with me? Just for a little while. It's been so long since I played with anyone.
Oh, okay. But I need your help first.
I have to also note the quality music throughout the medium. Akira Yamaoka of Silent Hill fame collaborated with the Bloober composer on the soundtrack. There's even a couple of tracks with Mary Elizabeth McGlynn singing. It's hard to say what the split was for the tracks, but Akira's output is obvious. I'm sure working with him played a large part in Bloober getting the green light for the Silent Hill 2 remake. The first meeting with Sadness also shows a moment that broke the game's immersion due to my settings. I enabled subtitles, along with the names associated with who is speaking. The reason for this is twofold. It makes editing videos easier for finding key dialogue moments. For you, the viewer, it's to give you an idea of who is speaking if you're not familiar with the game. The thing is, the game spoils who is talking before the reveal. It doesn't show question marks before Sadness reveals her name. This happened for a couple of other characters. A small hiccup, but one that took me out of the moment. It's not going to impact everyone depending on the settings used, but something to note. It's the Maw, the monster that pursues us throughout, that caused the Neva massacre. The Maw hopped from one body to another and went on a killing spree.
Hello, my love. It's your favorite nurse. Are you in there? Even a speck of you left? I hope so. 'Cause I want you to feel everything.
The nurse. It got to her first. But why?
Thomas, the man that phoned Marianne to come to Neva during the intro, is a medium like herself. Sadness, or Lily, is the daughter of Thomas. Sadness tells us to find Richard, a mentor to Thomas. As a painter, Richard used the spiritual world that Thomas saw as a medium to inspire his artwork, but the two would have a falling out. Becoming the manager of Neva, Thomas invites Richard to work there, reconciling for a time. Richard becomes Uncle Richard to Lily, and they become close. Well, too close as things take a turn for the dark.
You know, Lily, you remind me of someone. A girl I knew when I was very young.
Did you love her?
Yes, with a young, innocent love, free of the ferocity of adult lives.
Richard. I'm getting a weird vibe from him. There's grief, sorrow, and something else.
For a time, we switched to playing as Thomas. He's looking for evidence of Richard's wrongdoings against his daughter Lily. His spirit form emerges to help him. This differs from how Marianne's power works as a medium.
Look who finally decided to let me out of my cage. And only when you need my help. Surprise. Surprise.
Thomas confronts Richard. Richard says there's something within him that made him do what he did. Using his powers, Thomas enters Richard's spiritual world. And here is where one of the medium's major hiccups occur, and one I knew about going in. Walking through his spirit world, we learn about Richard's childhood, and it's a doozy. A kind father that died in World War II. In his place arrives a stepfather who's physically abusive to Richard and sexually abusive to his mother. To get rid of him, Richard's mother frames the stepfather as a collaborator with the Nazis, leading to his death. Through this information given to the Nazis, a hiding Jewish family dies, including a girl named Rose, one that Richard loved and was close with. In one of the most eye-rolling shots I've come across in some time, we see withering roses to symbolize her death.
Rose? No! Please, wake up! Wake up!
While you're at it, why not have a scene before her death where they kiss, having the song Kiss from a Rose by Seal playing? But wait, it gets worse. There's another character with the name of a flower.
Rose? Is that you?
There's a demon within Richard, known as the Child Eater. This is what Richard was referring to while talking with Thomas. It was the demon that made him do what he did to Lily. Thomas finds the spirit of Richard's child self and sends him away, leaving the Child Eater behind. This puts Richard into a vegetative state, one he remains in until his death during the Neva massacre. Back to Marianne, she encounters what remains of the Child Eater, the demon within Richard. Marianne sends his spirit away. Yeah, this entire stretch is a mess. A showing of how trauma and abuse begets more trauma and abuse, in a way shows Richard in a sympathetic light. It's the Child Eater, the demon within Richard, that made him do what he did to Lily. He didn't have control over it. Now, to be clear, Marianne doesn't give Richard a free pass on this. She says Richard should have fought back. She doesn't throw a pity party to him. When you're covering dark subject matter such as sexual abuse, you have to be very careful in how you handle it, even more so with children involved. There's little margin of error using the subject matter. It's easy for it to come across as hacky, lazy, edgy, or in poor taste, where it takes away from the story instead of adding to it. There's a good reason you don't see the subject matter covered by many games. Your writing needs to be on point, and the medium simply isn't up to the task. And this is one of the main reasons I have grave concerns about the Silent Hill 2 remake. Silent Hill 2 was able to cover sexual abuse in a way that worked with the story told. The medium shows none of that delicacy required to handle such dark subject matter. Yes, they have a template to work from, but what I've seen of the medium's writing remains at the surface level. For a game like Silent Hill 2, where so much of the story lies below the surface, that is a grave concern. When Marianne sends away the Child Eater, he thanks her as the girl from the Red House. She has a past at Neva that she cannot remember. These parting words gives our next destination. More pieces fall into place with some large plot revelations at the Red House. Marianne and Lily have a history here. They're sisters, with Marianne being the younger sister. It's implied that their mother died in childbirth when Marianne was born. As a result, Lily hates her. These medium powers from Thomas pass down to his daughters. Due to his powers, the Soviets and Germans studied Thomas's medium capabilities as a child. He escaped and made a life for himself as the manager of Neva. When he dealt with Richard, he sent him into a vegetative state, something he did to scientists that did research on him. This tips off agencies, who send a man, Henry, to investigate Thomas's powers. For leverage, he sets his house, the Red House, on fire with his children inside for leverage. See Thomas's powers in action. As a result of the molestation from Richard, the Maw awoke inside Lily. With the house on fire, the Maw offers her a deal. Set him free and he will save her and Marianne. Lily accepts the deal.
But I can't leave her here. She'll die.
Can't remember, Mommy. It's all her fault.
No, she's my sister.
Then set me free, and I will save you both.
The fire puts Marianne into a coma and forgets what happened. Instead of bringing her back, Thomas keeps her away from Neva. She would fall under the care of Jack later down the road. The revelation about Marianne isn't meant to be a huge twist. There are several clues along the way up to it. You can find a note at the beginning of the game talking about Marianne suffering from burns as a child. Plus, Thomas is also medium. While under interrogation by Henry, Thomas enters his spiritual world, in a stretch that goes on far too long. He has a dark past we learn about, although different from Richard's past. There's a quote-unquote stealth section here that differs from the Maw. You could run past these lights with no penalty. So what was the point of it? Thomas goes to deal with the monster within Richard to set his child self free, only to find out unlike Richard, there is only the demon known as the Hound. This traps the spirit of Thomas within the Hound.
What the hell are you? What exactly were you hoping to find here? A guilty conscience? The vulnerable child behind the monster? There is no child. There is only me.
Thomas's spirit self remains trapped until Marianne sends the Hound away. Now with some tweaks, you could have merged the characters of Richard and Henry. Having someone close to Thomas having his hands forced for whatever reason to betray him to set his house on fire, that would have been bleak and fits with what the story's going for. Instead of having Richard's actions awakening the Maw within Lily, you could have had the death of her mother be the cause for its awakening. What happened to Lily and Thomas after the fire? We find an underground bunker from the war, which Thomas used to barricade them both in. Through the power of research and salt, Thomas is able to sever his connection from his spiritual side that he longs for down here. He would keep Lily down here to keep the Maw from escaping. It's a bleak life Lily has to live.
Quite the selection. So she could doll herself up with no one to see her. Maybe he meant well, but somehow this just feels sadistic.
From the notes that we could find from Francis, he heard one day screaming from the bunker. He let Lily out, which in turn let the Maw out, causing the Neva massacre. As mentioned earlier, the Francis notes are one of the few things the game doesn't spell out. Marianne doesn't comment on them. It lets the player come to that conclusion instead of the game spelling it out for us. Too bad the rest of the game didn't do this. At long last, Marianne comes face to face with Thomas. Or at least the spirit Thomas. What happened to the material world Thomas, the one that called us at the beginning, that's left up in the air. Things finally come full circle. At various points throughout the medium, we cut to Marianne talking to someone about the game's events. That has been Spirit Thomas all along. With the maw coming, Spirit Thomas goes to hold it off as we find Lily waiting at the lake, the one Marianne has seen in her dreams. Before we leave, he speaks some notable parting words to keep in mind.
You can't always save everyone, butterfly. Trust me, I know. And I'm sorry.
We get another forced walking sequence, with a nice tune featuring Mary Elizabeth McGlynn singing. You know, this mode could have been more effective if the game wasn't full of forced walking stretches. But hey, it is a walking simulator after all. At the end of the pier, Marianne and Lily reunite. There's a large exposition dump from Lily in case you haven't been paying attention that more or less summarizes everything that happens. Lily wants Marianne to kill her. With Lily's death, Marianne can send the maw away for good. Lily would do so herself, but she says the monster won't let her. The maw appears, but Marianne turns the gun on herself. She's hoping on the fact that her own death will be enough to send away the maw. The parting words of Spirit Thomas echo as the screen fades to black with the sound of a gunshot.
It has to be you.
It'll never stop.
Finish this.
Only you can end this.
You can't always save everyone, butterfly.
It's left up in the air who Marianne shot. And so ends the medium. Now this ending is where a major critical talking point comes up, one I was familiar with before playing. Thomas brings up the point of you can't save everyone, something that echoes in the game's final shots. An interpretation I've seen is that the game is saying that people like Lily, with all she's suffered through, is a burden on others. She's better off dead and breaking the cycle. Playing through the medium myself, I didn't come to that conclusion. Is it bleak? Yes. Is the execution what they're going for sloppy? Absolutely. I'm sure the poor execution led some to make this conclusion of people like Lily being a burden, but I didn't reach that same conclusion. Now, as mentioned earlier, having the maw emerge within Lily could have been handled better. The way they did so, having as a result of the molestation from Richard, wasn't the best of choices. Tying it in with the cycle of abuse and trauma, and how they tied in Richard's backstory was ill-advised, a delicate subject matter that they weren't able to pull off. But to make the connections with this, to come to the conclusion that this means Lily is a burden and better off dead, I didn't see the game telling us this. To note, I'm aware of similar criticisms made against other Bloober titles like Blair Witch and Layers of Fear, and how those games tackle similar subject matter with abuse, trauma, and PTSD. Having not played those games, I can't comment on them. The Medium is one of those games where multiple endings would have been a much better choice. An ending where Thomas steps in to sacrifice himself to save his daughters. In the post-credits, we see what looks to be the material world Thomas in the spirit world, a setup for something that might happen one day. But the medium felt more or less complete, no need for a sequel. An ending choice with Thomas, knowing he can't save everyone, giving his own life to let his daughters live could have worked. Bleak, but with a tinge of hope. That said, the medium is a ho-hum experience, and nothing here demonstrates that Bloober is capable of remaking Silent Hill 2 with grace. Yes, they have a template to work with, but with what I've seen here, they're going to miss what makes Silent Hill, especially 2, so compelling. A leap into the psyche and unconscious that pays homages to works like David Lynch and beyond. Games that have remained in players' minds for so many years. Games that have been dissected to death, but for good reason. I don't see anything in the medium that fills me with confidence beyond getting a surface-level take of Silent Hill 2. To be fair, it's not like this is the first go-around of others missing the mark with Silent Hill. Look back at the Western Silent Hill output, especially Downpour and Homecoming. Talk about missing the mark. Origins and Shattered Memories from Climax Studios? A better understanding, most notable with Shattered Memories, but that took things in a different direction. But unlike Shattered Memories, a reimagining of the first Silent Hill, Bloober is making a full-fledged remake. A remake of a title that's become legendary over the years. As mentioned earlier, I'm not a fan of remakes. Silent Hill 2 is one of the last games in my mind that needs a remake. It was very much lightning in a bottle. It would be a monumental task for anyone to remake it. Now, not every psychological horror title needs to work itself deep into your mind well after the credits roll. That was my experience with the medium. Some decent ideas and moments with major stumbles. It has its audience and it has its fans, but to give them the keys to a title that stands head and shoulders above all when it comes to psychological horror, that's where I have grave concerns. Expect a remake that gets some elements at surface level right. Bloober shows proof here building a quality atmosphere. What we've seen with the combat, well, it's not like they have much experience on that front. I'm not expecting it to be much better than what we've seen so far, but expect a remake with less subtlety. Look at that opening shot in the first trailer with James in the mirror compared to the original. Expect overly chatty characters where too much is spelled out to the player. A game for people who thought the town Silent Hill made James stupid. To be clear, this is less an indictment on Bloober Team, but more of a modern gaming problem. Bloober mentioned in interviews that they're going to be modernizing elements that quote-unquote haven't aged well. If that isn't throwing up red flags in your mind, I don't know what else to say. As mentioned, I am glad to have played the medium. Not a great experience, and it's a shame that the dual reality mechanic is nowhere near close to its potential, one in which they threw a patent on, but gives me a better understanding of what to expect for the Silent Hill 2 remake, something I have little hope for. But having experienced the medium myself, my concerns have shifted. They're different than what they were before. Preconceived notions that changed having played it. Better? Worse? I'm not really sure. In closing, here's a reminder about the Silent Hill 2 Enhanced PC Edition. The best and easiest way to play Silent Hill 2 on modern hardware. A toaster can run it. Installation's a breeze, and you can find a copy of the PC version of Silent Hill 2 on sites like My Abandonware or the Internet Archive. Thanks for watching. If you haven't done so already, like, comment, subscribe. If you'd like to support the channel further, consider becoming a YouTube or Patreon member. You'll get access to videos earlier, you'll be featured in the forthcoming credits, and you'll get periodic updates.
No. Nuh-uh. No. Nuh-uh. No. Nuh-uh. No. Nuh-uh.